Welcome to Feminine Power Time. Turn off the chatter and tune in to what matters. This is the place where we reimagine the way we in the world work from the inside out, where we take leadership, personal leadership, leadership in the world, plus well-being, plus wisdom, and we put it all together to create the new. Because why would we keep doing the old stuff when we have the power within us to actually do things differently? My name is Christine Arylo, and I am your host. And today we are continuing on in our second part of our series. It's all about the power and the practice to see and break through the patterns, my dear, that you no longer need. And that the patterns that none of us actually any longer need, because as it turns out, as a collective, this is a breakthrough time. And we can either embrace it with all of our hearts and open up our wisdom and learn how to actually not just navigate transition and transformation and the wobbly bobblies of this banana world that has been ratcheting up its intensity. Well, I don't know. You could go all the way back to the late 1960s when they say the age of Aquarius was the dawning. Remember that song, The Dawning of the Age of Aquarius? I won't sing it any more than that. But it's true. I mean, it's true on so many different levels. And we're no longer dawning, you all. The sun has risen. We can see it now. And we are about to move in from an astrological perspective. We're moving into a 20-year cycle, and not just astrology, because it's also astronomy. It's all up there, all connected. We're moving into a new 20-year cycle as a collective. And you can feel it, right? You can feel things speeding up. You can see things changing. You can see things that feel like they're pulling apart, and the world has gone crazy and mad and yeah, because it actually has to, because we need to break apart a matrix that some say, I don't know, has been in place 2,000 years, it could have been 2,500, 5,000, we'll just say thousands and thousands of years. So from a culture perspective, you and I, we are not separate from the culture. We are part of the culture, and we are also individual. And there's not just one reality. When people say, oh, I have to go back to reality, I'm like, that's an incorrect equation and perspective. I mean, you could have that perspective of like, I'm at a retreat and, oh, that was lovely, or I had a weekend with my family, but now I have to go back to reality. But then you've just entrained yourself into the overculture, what Clarissa Pinkola Estes calls the overculture, named it so aptly, which is the crazy culture, I call it the banana world, that is full of domination and control and all of the things. This is not a conspiracy theory. You just have to open up your eyes and you'll see how wacky doodle things are set up. And humans made them this way for lots of different reasons. And that overculture keeps us trapped in it. It's the metaphor I like to use is like an ocean or a fishbowl, depending on how trapped you are. And it's the water that we swim in. And if you can't see the water, you can't actually see what's real. So this series, which is the last in the 8th year, the 8th season of Feminine Power Time, is all about how do we individually and collectively break through patterns that no longer serve us and that actually limit us and sabotage us and keep us stuck in old paradigms and ways of thinking and being and working that cannot kind of take us into where we're going. And what I love about thinking about this and thinking about this for yourself, both in your own life, but also for the world, like we don't know if how we got here is right or wrong, because it's not a right-wrong situation. So think about it first in your own life, like all of the things, whatever age you are, just kind of be like, okay, I am here now, and this is my biological age. I always like to say the amount of time I've lived on the planet. Side note, I never ask anyone how old they are. You should never ask that question. It's a ridiculous question. I ask people, how long have you been on the planet? I mean, just think about that. It's like, because every time you ask how old you are, it just makes you feel old. So if you just ask how long you've been on the planet, totally different consciousness. So think about how long you've been here. And you think about all of the things that have happened to get you here now. The path that you've taken, your career path, your relational path, your health path, your money path, like all of it. We don't know, you don't know if who you are today, and let's just say that you are a better you, a more evolved you, a more healed you, a more free you than you were whenever you, not when you first dropped in, but let's just say you also dropped in with some karma and some dharma that needed to be worked out. But let's just say, you are more who you are than you've ever been since you kind of rooted here on this planet. And so just taking a breath and exhaling, it's like, what if it all was just okay? And it isn't to say that bad things haven't happened, things that you would rather take back and erase, because we all have trauma, some of us way deeper than others. So I don't want to discount any of that. I just want to give us all a fresh start as we're at this threshold crossing, as we go into and starting in this next 20-year cycle. And also just at this time of Passovers and Easters and equinoxes, this time always between March and May, it's a time of allowing ourselves to just really let go of the density and we no longer need to carry. And the same thing is true on a collective basis. I remember when I was writing Overwhelmed and Over It, and I kind of shine the light on the 7 root causes of the burnout and self-sacrifice and overwhelm that we have not been able to shake and keeps getting worse. And the first one is that the systems that we live and swim in now were created, around the Industrial Revolution. Depending on if you start there, you start back at Rome, kind of just depends, but we'll just say for our sakes, back at the Industrial Revolution, and who knows, we don't know. There's certainly many things that happened that were egregious, egregious, I think is a good word. Egregious against humans, egregious against indigenous cultures, egregious, so egregious. And the thing about compassion, whether it's for ourselves or it's for a time and a place, is that it doesn't condone the things and the choices that we made against ourselves or against others. But it does allow a field of understanding, of a consciousness that we might have been in as a culture, that we might have been in as individuals, that we're just not in. I mean, right? If you think of yourself 20 years ago, and some of the things we talked about this last session is that you ate, the friends that you hung out with, the things that you thought or you believed, if you sat down with yourself 20 years ago, or, it's or even 10 years ago, you're a different person, hopefully more awake, more aware, a higher level of frequency. And so a culture is like that too. And so we can look back, and we should look back, and we should never forget. But if we carry around the rage and the resentment and all of the heavy stuff, and we come at this newness for our own lives, this newness and the possibility for humanity on this planet, with all that resentment and rage and grief stuck in our bodies and our beings, and that fear, it just creates more fear. And so we create new realities that are still based in fear and scarcity and separation and over giving and all the things that we've talked about. So I don't know if what it took humanity to get here. There's good stuff, there's bad stuff. Could we have gotten here differently? Probably. But what I care about is now. And I care about that you and I, dear one, have the power within us to look inside ourselves and see which of these patterns did I pick up? Which of these patterns might I have come in with? Which of these patterns have I been working for decades or years, and I've been whittling it down, kind of like a peach, where you're just eating and eating until you get to the core. You've been whittling it down, or it's like blackberry in your garden. You've been whacking it and whacking it and whacking it, and finally and digging, and you're like, oh my God, there is the root ball. I've gotten there. Or it's like one of my spiritual mentors and mothers, who's one of the best pattern finders and pattern breaker throughers. I got to study with one of the best. Her name is Arylo, and I still sit with her when I have a pattern that needs to be transmuted and brought language to, because I need that support too. We're going to talk about that. Today we're going to talk about three models for breaking through patterns that you can put in place. So 3 models or 3 practices, really. And I remember Arylo saying to me, just when you're working with a pattern, we have this, stupid overculture belief that if I just could name it and say it, I should be able to break through it, and then we're done with it. And as if it worked that way. Sometimes you hear the metaphor, there's onions, lots and lots and lots of layers. We're like layers. She said, it's more like an apple tree, like you go, there's an apple tree and you look around the apple tree and you're like, and it's full of your patterns and imprints that you came in. And you can yank those apples off that aren't ready yet, they're not ripe yet. But are you really going to do anything? It's going to be bitter. It's going to be sour. It's going to be hard. Not in a good way. Or you could walk up to the tree and say, which of you is ready to walk through? Which of you is ready to be, transmuted into a pie? In the case of the apple, you want to be turned into sweetness, to be savored. I kind of feel like that with our patterns, right? It's I don't like apple pie. I guess I'd have to have a cherry tree because I don't like apple. I don't like apple. I don't like to eat apples of any kind. So you could pick whatever fruit you want, okay? And imagine transforming that fruit into something that you could eat and that you could savor, and that sweetness would come into your life. That's what it's like when we actively engage in breaking through our patterns. And that's what today is about. It's what's the pattern or imprints that are really ripe and ready for you to break through? And then what are the practices that we need, the perspectives to understand how that works? So what I did today for all of us is I wrote down 3 different practices I use and I've used for many years that have really served me. And I'm going to share them with you all. So that's what we're going to do. So what I want you to do is, if you listen to the first in the series, great. Bring whatever perspective came up. If you haven't been thinking about it at all, no worries. Start here and we'll just trust whatever comes up. And, or if you're tuning in at the second part here, go back and listen to the first and then come back, or listen to this, go back to the first, and then you can listen to this one again. Follow your inner wisdom. You will know. And I want to just remind you all, just before we go into these 3 parts, the annual Burnout to Balance practice, which uses all of the practices I'm about to share with you, and is really built to be able to help you narrow it down into a specific imprint that is causing you to under-receive and overgive in your career, your relationships, your money, your health, your wealth, whatever it is that's keeping you from truly receiving. Come and join us. We do it every year in April, or at least we have almost every year in different ways since 2013. I know we're doing it this year. Don't know if we'll do it next year. I never really know because every year is different. But we'll be there this year, and with some new surprises and all of that. So even if you've done it before, join us again every year. I leave with a golden insight, at least one, and a renewal of my practices, daily, morning, evening, my weekly practices, and also just my relationship to what I ingest into my body, heart, mind, and spirit. And you can find out more about that at burnouttobalancepractice.com. All right, dear ones, let's take a deep breath in and out. Taking a sip out of the first coffee mug I ever made. On the bottom of it in pottery, it says, elevate with joy. So let's dedicate the series, let's dedicate this exploration to that, to you elevating with joy. Instead of having to work hard and go in there and suffer and toil with these imprints, God, what would it be like to walk up to that fruit tree and put my hand there and the fruits just fall off? Or maybe for you, it's an olive tree because you like olive tapenade. And then savor it and work with it and be in joy about it, so that every day, more and more joy. And also that there could be grief still and anxiety and struggle, but it shows up and it's little, it's little. Shadow's always still there. So I always say with the work with the inner mean girl work that Amy and I created, what we found in our research is you don't want to kill your inner mean girl, your inner critic, that shadow part. You don't want to silence it. You don't for sure want to tame it. Oh my God, please don't tame it. You want to calm it so it can tell you what it is that you need. You see, those parts of us that do sabotage and fill us with negative thinking and cause us to choose the sabotaging choice in relationship, career, money, whatever it might be, they have information for us. And if they're crazy or we shut them down, they can't speak to us. They can't give us that wisdom. So we're blind to the wisdom that they have because they were created when we were little people, which is when these imprints really get activated. I think we come in with a lot of the imprints and patterns. They're our curriculum. And then just depending on how long we let that nerve, that imprint keep getting whacked and reinforced and how deeply those grooves go, depends on how far and long it takes us to refill those in and heal that garden. And so let's talk about that. We're going to use the metaphor of the garden for the first one here. So this is the practice. I use this. This is part of the 40-day practice that I do. When I do counsels, we do this. When I do individual coaching, I do this. And it's very simple. I'm doing this right now. I do it every spring. The practice is called I release, I embrace, or I release and I replace. So here's basically the theory. When we're working with patterns and imprints, you want to be able to get to the root ball. Think of it like a garden. If all you do keep going after the superficial surface level, these are the habits, these are the thoughts, these are the this, and you just keep whacking away at the leaves, which are important. Like you do need to understand it. I call it your burnout blueprint. So you do want to understand your habits, your mental beliefs, your emotions, the patterns that show up in relationships, because they all help us get to the root. But like I just did this review of a burnout blueprint the other day with a client of mine who's an executive at a company. And it's part of what I do in the first 3 months is we help kind of bring out that blueprint burnout, and we do it also in Burnout to Balance. And we went through all of those. Super helpful because you can see those and how they manifest. They're like the cues, like, oh, these are the leaves above the ground, but there's deeper roots in there. And so we're also working on, and we do this in the 40-day practice too, like what are the overs that are really running you? And the over giving patterns and imprints, and then what is it what's at the root of those, and that's where the gold is. So when you're choosing something to release, and this could be a habit or a pattern, like it could be a belief, a mind belief, it could be a habit, it could be a relational pattern. You always have to, so kind of think of it like you're digging out the roots, right? You're digging out the roots. You have to have something to replace it with. Because if you like pull the blackberry out of your garden and there's just a big hole there and you don't put something else in the hole, more weeds will come in, new blackberry will root. And so think of this like from a habit perspective. So for example, every March and April, Noah and I do a 40-day, usually it's 40 days. Last year it was 4 months. It kind of varies. We do a release and replace to up level our well-being and our patterns and our habits, and kind of get rid of the stuff that's actually dimming our light. So for example, like last year we released pork, say, and beef and week 3. And we're in this 40-day container. And so we just add something every week. So we release that. And then what are we going to embrace? What are we going to embrace or replace that with? Because otherwise it's just like this when you give up something, like I'm going to give up chocolate, I'm going to give up wine, I'm going to give up, whatever thing you're going to give up. But if you don't replace it with something, there's just a big hole there. So the part of you, like the inner mean girl, the inner critic, the woundy part, where the imprints come from, it needs something there. So like I replace chocolate with licorice tea because what the chocolate gives me is sweetness. What sweetness gives me is a sense of sweetness, which is actually not just a food, a taste, like it's also like an energy I'm wanting. So I find this every year when I do this practice is that I'm missing sweetness. And interesting, in traditional Chinese medicine, sweetness is connected to the earth element. And oftentimes when I don't feel grounded, I don't feel like I'm being supported, that I have what I need, I crave more sugar because I'm really creating and craving the sweetness. And so then I go for the chocolate, I go for the sugar. All connected, right? This is why, like we talked about last time, body, mind, heart, and spirit, all connected. So if you're just like, well, I'm not going to eat meat and I'm not going to eat sugar, but you don't replace it with the thing that is actually giving you the essence of what it is that you're looking for, you'll just put another shit pattern in there, or it will never really break free. It will come back, and usually with a vengeance. And so this can also work at a bigger level. So you've heard me, I think we talked about this in the Burnout to Balance series in the podcast, how every year I, and everyone that's in the Feminine Wisdom Way, and also the people that I do leadership coaching with, we choose one over giving imprint, and then we work with it and release it every year and really transmute it and then replace or embrace something else. So like I said last time, I'm releasing struggle and I'm embracing ease. Super simple. And I even put my hands out, like you could put your hands out right now. And the one on the left is release. The one on the right is release. and the one on the left is embrace. So what's something you know already, even if you can't tell exactly what the root is or what the imprint is, what is something, even just a habit or a mindset that you know, oh, I'm ready to release that. And you could just do that with me. Like, even if you don't know what it is, just take that right hand and just let it go. It's like sending it back to compost. And then taking that left hand and putting it to your heart. This is what we were talking about, right? With burnout and overwhelm and self-sacrifice and being stuck in patterns where we don't have enough, or we're in relationships that are not honoring of us. It's not the mind that's the problem. It's a heart and spirit level that really is where the deeper roots are. And then the body and the mind go along. But the depth, this is why in the depth is really in the heart and the spirit. And if you're willing to go there, that's where then you start the body, the weight drops off. The stress that's been stuck in there starts to melt off. The thoughts start to change because you're putting something in your heart and you're nourishing that spirit. So even if you just, what is one thing you would love to have more of, to feel more of, to sense more of? All right. That's number one. You can just write that down. I release, I embrace, or I release and I replace. And I'll just say, these are not just coachy-woachy things that Christine created. Nothing bad about being coachy-woachy, but there's a lot of models out there in the world that are very mental, and they have benefit if you just want to work on the mental. But if you want to work at a deeper level, where you're going to get into the mind and you're going to touch the mind, but you're really going to get into the spirit and the heart at a soul level, and you're also going to really make a shift at a deeper somatic level, you got to work with models that are connected to the sacred. And the word sacred, it just means, sacred means devoted to wholeness, without violence to self or other, with respect. So any practice that comes from a deeper, more sacred tradition that has heart and spirit in it has the potential to offer what I call sacred transformation. So sacred transformation, and I've talked about this before, there's a podcast series on it, I have videos on it. Sacred transformation is change, making personal change, family change, relational change, collective change, team change, devoted to wholeness. So wholeness at the center, without violence to self or others, with respect. And so think of that in terms of these patterns that are, for you, breakthrough, that you want to break through, and they will have impact on others as well as yourself. Think about it also for the collective. Like, imagine if the collective went through sacred transformation, how different we might experience what's happening versus struggling and fighting and scarcity and all that other stuff. Instead of struggle and scarcity and power over, it's sacred. And so release and embrace is very deeply connected to the sacred feminine. And so I just share that with you so you know. Kind of what we're doing over here is take the deep esoteric soul stuff. It's not about religion. It's about being human and being connected into a bigger thing. And I don't know anything in the world that doesn't and couldn't benefit from more soul and heart. Do you? So, all right, moving forward. Number 2. So the number 2 piece that's needed to really break through is space, structure, and support. I call them the 3 S's. Space, structure, and support. And I would actually also add sisterhood in there for women and brotherhood in there for men. But that's not an S. So sometimes I say Sangha. Sangha is community. So that way that kind of works also for anyone, right? So it's space, structure, support, and Sangha. And Sangha is a word that really just means community of practice. So like when I went to yoga yesterday, one of the reasons I've been called to go back to yoga is because the breakthroughs that I'm going through right now, I need to be in a space that is held by someone else. So really wonderful teachers through the Ayurvedic Institute and the Ayurvedic Institute in general. I need structure. That's the practice of Kundalini yoga. with the mantra and the asanas and the breathing and the pranayama. I need support. I need to have the support of the collective, so the support of the teacher. So the teacher that's teaching, she's a wonderful teacher, and I also do a flow restorative class. He's also a wonderful teacher, so I have a male and a female teacher on Sundays and Thursdays, and I'm committed. I'm devoted to this practice, at least through the time before I head to California for my Canyon Ranch retreat at the end of May. So I'm in, like I'm doing it. And then that also is the Sangha. So doing it in community, like I've been doing yoga every day myself since 2013. I was trained in Kundalini yoga in 2015 and continued on with more trainings after that. So I have all the access to all the resources, but I actually need for my own transformation, space, structure, support, and Sangha. Both to be, and think about this for yourself, right? It's like, so these four things: space, structure, support, and Sangha. To be in a higher frequency. So you need to be to be able to be in a frequency that is elevated outside of the banana world, whatever banana world. It's a big banana world. It's your org world, your team world, your family world. Like you need that space, structure, support, and Sangha. And then there's the structure, like actual things that you're doing that are holding you. In this case, for me, it's like the yoga and feminine wisdom way. It's like we have the new moons and we have the full moons, and we gather for the power pauses on the 8 turns. There's the structure. When I do organizational 4-month women's leadership cohorts, it's 4 months structure, 4 months. We meet every other week. Every other week is the structure, that they have a space outside of their day-to-day so that they can really rise above and tune into themselves and have a learning experience and have a place to get present. And that becomes a structure, right? So we need the space, the structure. So think of this: what spaces do you have? What spaces don't you have? What structure do you need as you're going through and breaking through whatever is on your docket for breakthrough this year? And then support. We all need good teachers. We all need great people. We all need people to also talk things through. So it's not just having a great teacher who's a great space holder, super important, but it's also we need support to talk through things. So this is one of the reasons I continue to do the councils. Like I have 2 councils today, one for the Align Your Design Council, that is for women professionals redesigning the next phase of their career and life, and another that's I call it kind of a mystical leadership group that is really embracing their role as evolutionary change agents in the world. They've been meeting in council for, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years. And then this other council that's 7 months. But what happens in it is they get to talk about it. They get to speak out loud and not have it all figured out. It's the co-creative practice we call conversating. So where are the spaces and the structures and the support that you have to talk things out? It might be one-on-one with a therapist or a coach or an advisor, or Noah is that person for me. I have my 6 wise women that I can call and like deepen with and just be like blah 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 blah, and by conversating it comes out, right? So there's something to really be said about that one-on-one support. It's really important for us to have, and so or small groups. There's a theory called the power of 8. There's also a theory around groups of 15 or less that create more of like what's called a fractal family system. And so those numbers are very powerful to have 6, 8, and 13 to 15. So just kind of thinking about that. And then the bigger one is Sangha. Sangha is community. And so those are bigger networks and communities. Like, so go to a yoga class, right, with 18 people in it, or you might be part of an association or, a bigger group. Who are your Sanghas? So write those down: space, structure, support, and Sangha. And they could be Sanghas that might just gather for a little while. In many ways, the 40-day practices, those have a Sangha element to them because we come together 3 times during the process, day 1, day 20, and day 40. And so there's a collective field that's also established that's together, and everyone knows we're all together for those 40 days. So it's why the structure of 40 days can really work when you do it inside of a group, because the group creates a collective energy field. Or in like the feminine wisdom way, every year women sign up. We do 1 year renewals, and so it's like, okay, we're 100 women and we're traveling together for the next 1 year, and it creates an energy field. So where are those energy fields for you? Okay. Last one, I'm going to kind of combine these. This is the 4 stages of transformation and the triangle of transformation that I shared yesterday, that are kind of like almost like that are important to know that you're doing all 3. So here's the thing about breaking through any pattern or imprint. It's like an onion. There are layers to it. And I really think of patterns more like a spiral. So you're going to come back around, and you're going to come back around sometimes to the same pattern, like, for 20 years. And you're like, what the F? How can this still be running in me? It might run in you, dear one, for the rest of your life at some level. And there are other patterns that are for a cycle. Maybe they're a 10-year cycle, they're a 15-year cycle, but they're showing you something. And sometimes I think, we need, I believe the patterns, we choose them. How long we stay in them is up to us. And the level of pain and struggle they cause us. Like, we can't avert pain, but we can avert how long we have to suffer and struggle. We're going to struggle. Struggle's part of learning. Struggle part of changing, just like a little person who's like learning to walk or ride a bike. We get the wobbles. Like, that's going to happen. So expect it. If you expect it, then you don't get all contracted and strained up when things aren't so smooth. Ease for me is not about not having any obstacles. It's about what I do when the obstacles come up. So in the I Ching and in the Taoist wisdom tradition, they so wise. There's so many good things in that tradition and that lineage. Is like, it says water doesn't try to go through the rock. The water goes around the rock, like that. And you all know the Sisyphus story, right? Sisyphus keeps carrying the rock up the hill. Gets up to the hill and the rock falls back down. And he keeps doing it again and again. And at some level, Sisyphus knows that he's doing it and he can't stop. Where are you doing that in your own life? Relationships, money, health, whatever. And you keep doing the same thing and it doesn't change, or it only gets a little better. Watching this right now with people in their well-being, and they're just like totally focused only on the Western approach to things. And there's value there, but like, dude, if you've been doing the same thing for 3 years or 2 years and it's not changing, taking more meds, it's not going to help you. You need some other support, some other wisdom, some other openings. And I don't understand really why people get all weirded out about being open to other things that they would call Eastern or alternative, although they're not really alternative because they've been around for longer. And if we just opened up to holistic, right, devoted to wholeness, what's going to support us in wholeness? And all, we can put that in all levels, right? Whether it's staying in a relationship because we stay for the family, but really what would support the family to be in wholeness would maybe for those people not to be married anymore. And I know these are challenging decisions or things that we want, it's like, but I want a house, or I want a baby, or I wanted this and I wanted that. And it's just like, it's not working. And maybe there's a pattern likely underneath all of that, but does it mean that if you change the pattern, you just get what you want? No, it doesn't mean that. This goes all the way back to the essence of what I talked about with the apple. The essence of the apple, it's like, you don't necessarily always get to choose the form. That's the deal with the universe. You get to choose the essence, but not the form and not the timing. And that's when you've really surrendered and you can be in sacred transformation because you're opening up to whatever you want to call it. Call it the force, call it divine, call it spirit, call it God, call it the universe, call it, just the natural world. I don't care what you call it, but the commonality is that the natural world is working towards harmony, is working towards wholeness. And so you and I are a part of that. But it takes time, right? Just like nature takes its time. It's in no rush. It's got thousands and billions of years. Now, we don't have billions of years in this lifetime. But it's important to understand that you're going to go through 4 stages of transformation. Stage 1 is awareness. Stage 2 is reflection. Stage 3 is change in the moment. Stage 4 is integration and elevation. I have an article about this on my blog and on my website on ChristinaArylo.com. You can find that model there, as well as other models that I talk about. And it's also the model that we use in the 40-day practice and in Feminine Wisdom Way. Awareness. You can see what you couldn't see before. Now you can do something with it, right? We talked about that last time. You can see it. Reflection. You go back into your life, back into the same situation, money, relationship, work, career, whatever. And the same thing happens again. You get triggered or whatever happens that triggers you, the scenario. And you're not able to change your response, your thought, your belief, your emotion, your reaction in the relationship or situation. But afterwards, you're able to look back and be like, oh my God, there that thing is. Just like I was able to do in the yoga class, right? Where I told you I went to yoga, didn't cure it, but then I came home last night and then I was like, oh, there that thing is. Now, what do I want to do with it? That's change in the moment. And I would actually say I was more kind of like at a 3 or a 2.75 yesterday. And I was very aware of watching my mind and all the crazy things it was doing. But 3 is change in the moment. And that's where in that moment, you can make a different decision. You make a different choice in how you're going to react. You respond versus react. Change your thought, change how you respond, change shift your feelings, get the support, whatever you're doing that. And then the last one is elevation and integration. You're operating in the new place. And then, you operate there for a while. Remember I said 40 days to break a pattern or habit, 120 to start rooting in a new one, and 1,000 days, 3 years to make it who you are. This is why every year I can come back and still do the burnout to balance practice and get a golden insight. This is why we keep doing Feminine Wisdom Way, and 75% of the women keep coming back every year. And every year I come back to it, and I've been doing it since like 2006. And I'm like, oh my God, I got another thing. I got another insight because I'm continuing to evolve. This is why people have councils where they're in it for years. It's like there's such a benefit to people knowing you and just being able to drop in and share. And I know it's like the piece is like, I don't have time, I don't have money. There's always an excuse. But I'll tell you one thing I noticed, and we'll talk about this next week, about the common distortions and patterns and imprints I see that keep us swirled up. And then also the ones I know are taking us towards the light, because that's the other reason for doing this podcast series is that I also want to shine on the light here. Is that, remember the triangle of transformation that I shared last time? This is where we're at. Heal, release and heal the past. Stabilize in the now, and create and lead into the new. You're doing all three things at the same time. And it's a little bit like standing on one of those, like standing on a triangle, and you're like trying to balance on one of those balls. Like on one side, you're releasing and healing the past while you're stretching into the new, and you got to stabilize in the now and be here now. So you're doing all three of those things. And so that's why the support, the structure, the sangha, the space, the working with the pattern, so you know what you're working with, because if you don't have language to it, it's just like this amorphous thing. And then getting, let me have some compassion with myself. Like, I'm going to go through these 40 days, or I'm going to do a full year, and I'm going to see myself, and I'm going to make incremental progress. And that's how elevation happens. It doesn't happen overnight. That little flower that blooms in the spring, or the buds that come out on the trees. So they say that tree's been resting and also working in the invisible realms, and then boop, just pops out one day. And you're like, wow, where did all that come from? And that we're kind of like that. So as we end today, I just want to, say, look around for some evidence of elevation. We called them #EOEs. It's a practice that we created in one of the leadership councils of like, we need to see evidence of elevation happening. So what are some of the patterns that you've been working them, them, you're consciously working with them, or you're starting to see? And what is some of the evidence of elevation? And I would encourage you and challenge you to choose at least 3. What's evidence of elevation? Someplace in your career and your work in the world, whatever that might be in the fullest definition of work in the world. What's some evidence of elevation in your relationships? And what's some evidence of elevation in your foundation of well-being, your health, your finances, your wealth, your practice, your home? One thing I know for sure is that we need to really see and feel the light and the progress that's happening in the elevation while we're courageously transmuting the shadow. Or else we get lost, you get confused, we get scared and we want to run back. And this, beloved, is not the time to run back. Do not run back. Do not keep trying to do the same thing and expecting different results. It is not going to work. Be wise and know what to preserve. and have the courage to stretch yourself and lean into your practices, lean into support, space, structure, sangha, and let's walk through this together. I'll be back next week with some of the common things I've been hearing from women in the councils and Feminine Wisdom Way and through my clients and myself, so we can kind of look at some of the collective stuff that we want to be aware of so we don't get stuck in that either, or gooped up, or what I like to call interference. And then what are some of the light ones that are like ready and they're online and they're ready for us to engage in. So I know you can feel it out there. I know you can feel those budding springs. And I look forward to the journey with you. I hope to see many of you in the Burnout to Balance practice. Remember to register at burnouttobalancepractice.com or from my website. And do share this podcast with a friend and share what you guys are all seeing. That's part of how we rise, right? There's support and sangha right there. All right, my loves. Talk to you soon. Much love.